When supporting your fire team in Destiny 2, an important decision you have to make is which subclass you're going to use. Your choice in subclass dictates things like what builds you can use, what buffs you can provide your allies, and more. So, from my support player perspective, I wanted to create a tier list going over my personal rankings for each subclass and their ability to support your team. My name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and let me start out by giving a quick disclaimer. So, before we get into our actual rankings, I just wanted to go over a few things. Firstly, please remember that this is a support tier list. There are strong subclasses that don't offer the best support options and vice versa. Just because something is ranked lower than you'd expect doesn't mean it's a bad subclass. It just means that it doesn't have the same support options or potency that other subclasses have. In that same vein, I thought about ranking each individual subclass on each class, but I want this to be more focused on the element as a whole. Also, this ranking will assume no seasonal artifact mods or anything like that are involved. It's based purely on the subclass itself and how weapons and armor interact with that subclass to provide buffs, debuffs, healing, and utility to your team. When it comes to these weapons and armor, please know that the examples I'm going to give are just very general suggestions. There are a ton of builds and all sorts of things you can use on each subclass, but I'm just going to give some quick, easy suggestions. Finally, remember that these are just my opinions. I'm good at what I do, but I'm also just some dude on the internet making these videos for fun. You are welcome to disagree with me, and you're welcome to use whatever you like to support your team. With that being said, let's get into our actual rankings, starting with Arc. So, if I were just ranking Arc as a subclass by itself, it would be very high as of the time of making this video. From a support player's perspective, though, it doesn't offer us a lot of ways to support our team, which is why it will be going in the C tier. You can definitely build into Arc support, don't get me wrong. The Ascension aspect on the Hunter can grant teammates Amplified. Storm's Keep can generate Bolt Charge for your team. Fallen Sunstar on the Warlock can generate some ability energy for your friends. The main way, though, that Arc builds tend to support their teammates is through the use of Blind. For those that don't know, Blind is an Arc subclass verb that basically stuns enemies and prevents them from attacking you. There are several weapons and abilities and exotic armor pieces that can blind enemies. The Hunter's Exodus and Mothkeeper's Wraps build is probably one of the better Arc support builds in the game. I personally also enjoy using the Warlock's Chromatic Fire for just some AoE blind that isn't reliant on Arc weapons. Where Arc starts to fall behind in terms of its support utility is mainly just that other subclasses do it better. Giving my friends Bolt Charge can be useful, but most Arc builds already have their own means of generating Bolt Charge, and you'd likely contribute more to your team's damage through providing Radiant or Weaken. Giving your team Amplified can be nice for the weapon handling, but it's mainly just used for going from point A to point B. Blind is an excellent form of crowd control, but Stasis, Strand, and even Void to an extent have their own forms of crowd control while having other ways of supporting the team. Overall, when you take all these things into account, especially when you factor in how Jolt works, Arc cements itself as a strong option for damage, mobility, and room clearing, but if you're looking for a subclass that offers meaningful support for your allies, I'd look elsewhere. Up next, we have Solar. The bread and butter of Destiny support builds, this subclass is likely the first thing you thought of when you saw this video. Well, that's understandable, because Solar is the first of two S-tier rankings on this list. I mean, where do I even start? Well, Scorch and Ignition are more focused on ad clear and damage, so I won't really linger on those. The main things we care about with Solar are Radiant, Restoration, and Cure. For those that may not know, Radiant is a damage buff, Restoration is a heal over time, and Cure is a burst heal. You've got a ton of different ways of applying all of these. For Hunters, I like to use Speed Loader Slacks paired with Acrobat Dodge to give my team some pretty crazy damage output. Phoenix Cradle is a personal favorite of mine for Titans, and I'll mention Precious Scars here too. It is technically subclass neutral, but Restoration is a solar verb, so I'm going to count it here. And Warlocks have the classic Speaker Sight Helmet, or the Lumina Assembler combo also works very well on a solar subclass. And those were just a handful of the many, many options we have for solar support. And that's before we even get into dedicated support supers and fragments. You've got stuff like Well of Radiance, Song of Flame, fragments like Ember of Benevolence, and all sorts of things. I mean, honestly, I could go on and on about solar, but chances are if you watch this channel, where I've done any supporting in Destiny over the years, you're probably well aware of how strong solar is in the support category. You'll likely see me using it 99.99% of the time in my videos, and I'm sure you don't need to guess as to why. Thanks to the sheer amount of damage buffs and healing that this subclass can provide for our teammates, Solar has become a staple in the Destiny support community as an all-around strong option with many build choices. And up next, we have Void. In my opinion, if Solar is the king of buffs and healing, then Void is the king of debuffs and protection. It's the other side of the support coin, if you will, and I actually think that, in the discussion of support subclasses, Void is nearly as good as Solar for providing support to your team, hence why I'm also putting Void in the S tier spot. To start, Weaken is going to be our most important subclass verb here. Supers like the Hunter's Tether or exotics like Tractor Cannon and even Fellwinter's Helm offer the strongest damage vulnerability in the game. Essentially, the Weaken debuff makes enemies take more damage, and depending on which source of Weaken you're using can be between 15 to 30% extra damage. Outside of that, there's tons of utility and protection to be found in the Void subclass. You can provide your teammates with overshields and invisibility, you can prevent your enemies from doing certain attacks and rip people out of their super with suppression, and some of the strongest damage blocking shields and bubbles and whatnot in the game are all Void based. For Titans, you have no shortage of options. Helm of Saint 14, Ursa Furiosa, Second Chance, and more all pair well with your shield and your bubble. Hunters have things like Omnioculus, Gyrfalcon, or Orpheus Rig to pair with the Tether. Warlocks have Fellwinter's Helm and Secant Filaments. When it comes to weapons, there are so many options. There are seriously so many exotics in this game that apply Weaken, it's not even funny. Much like Solar, there really aren't a shortage of options for Void support. It offers some of the strongest debuffs and shielding that you'll find in Destiny, and I think it can be a fun, yet still incredibly strong alternative for when you don't want to use Solar. You probably won't see me using it a whole lot, just because I'm mostly a Warlock main, and Titans and Hunters tend to have the better options for Void support, but, I might use it here and there if I get the chance to. Up next is Stasis. Admittedly, probably my least used subclass, but one that I had a surprising amount of fun with when recording this video. Stasis is almost exclusively focused on crowd control, and it's really good at it. Still though, despite how fantastic the crowd control is, it doesn't offer us much outside of that, so I'm going to put Stasis in the B tier. The subclass verbs we care about here are Slow, Freeze, and Frost Armor. I'll also throw in Stasis Shards because we can actually generate them for our allies. Slow and Freeze are going to be our most common options for support. We have to get a little creative to apply Frost Armor to our non-Stasis allies, but as long as we generate some shards, all Stasis classes shouldn't have any problems acquiring Frost Armor. In the gameplay, I'm using Cryosthesia as my exotic weapon, but you've got a good amount of options for Slow and Freeze exotics. For Warlocks, when it comes to armor, I tend to use the Balador's Wrathweavers. For Titans, I'm a pretty big fan of Hoarfrost Z, and for Hunters, I enjoy the Renewal Rasps. Overall, Stasis has some of the strongest and most consistent crowd control of any subclass in the entire game. A good Stasis support build can keep a whole group of enemies frozen and free for you and your allies to attack with no risk. If you're someone who enjoys strong crowd control and giving your allies some free kills, Stasis is definitely the element for you. Up next is Strand. Now, I won't lie, when it was first released, I had pretty much written off Strand. I thought the threadlings and the grapple hook were pretty cool, but outside of that, I just didn't really see any use for it as a support player. Over the years, though, Strand has really grown on me, and I actually really have a lot of fun using it. Still, though, I want to try to be objective, so from a support perspective, I'll be putting it in the B tier. Similarly to Stasis, Strand support mostly focuses on crowd control with some defensive buffs. The subclass verbs we care about are Suspend, Woven Mail, and Sever. I'll also mention Tangles since technically our allies can grab those. Suspend is our crowd control, and there are a ton of ways you can apply it. Woven Mail is a nice little damage resistance buff, and Sever actually makes enemies do less damage. When it comes to exotics, Service of Luzaku is a pretty unique support frame machine gun that you can see in the gameplay. But actually, when it comes to applying Woven Mail and Sever, I prefer the Navigator exotic trace rifle. Hitting your allies grants Woven Mail, hitting enemies gives them Sever. Very simple. For Warlocks, when it comes to armor, I like using Deimos of Fusion for more suspends. For Titans, I might go with Wishful Ignorance. It's not technically a support exotic, but it does reward you for a supportive playstyle with Banner of War. And for Hunters, I don't know, you guys don't really have a dedicated Strand support exotic, but I don't know, if I had to pick something, I guess I'd go with Bombardier since it can apply AoE Sever. Overall, Strand offers some very unique and interesting forms of support and utility. While the actual buffs and debuffs may not be quite as universally useful as some of the other contenders on the list, Strand support can be very situationally useful, and if nothing else, I think it's a lot of fun. It may not be my most used subclass, but if I were ranking these purely based on how fun it is, it'd be pretty close to the top for sure. And finally, we're on to Prismatic. Now, you may be going, okay, Doc, this is an easy one. Obviously, Prismatic will be in the S tier. Actually, no. Prismatic benefits from taking a lot of previous support options that we talked about already, but it doesn't take everything. As of right now, Prismatic still has limits, and while it offers a plethora of fantastic support options, it's more of a general support rather than filling a particular niche. For that reason, I'm giving it an A tier spot. It can provide a lot of the previous buffs and debuffs and whatnot that we've talked about already, though not quite as easily and consistently as the pure subclasses. Obviously, each class has their exotic class item, which can roll with some pretty decent support options, but I hope you don't get caught up on those, because thanks to the nature of Prismatic, you have arguably the largest variety of support build options. While, again, you may not always have the strongest version of that build, you will certainly have the most well-rounded builds, being very adaptable to a wide variety of encounters. For Warlocks, I know I mentioned it already, but Chromatic Fire pairs beautifully with Prismatic support builds. For Titans, despite some nerfs, I honestly do still enjoy Heart of Inmost Light, even for support builds, though you could always go with the classic Precious Scars again. For Hunters, I still enjoy using Speed Loader Slacks, or if I want something simple, again, Orpheus Rig. Overall, Prismatic support is a sort of jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none subclass. For your average player, especially in high-end content, Prismatic is probably the overall strongest subclass in the game right now. For support players specifically, though, where specialization and uptimes are a little more important than raw damage, Prismatic just doesn't have the same potency as Solar and Void when it comes to their respective roles. Still though, Prismatic serves to give support players a wide variety of options for supporting their team and making sure they're ready for any scenario. And that was my subclass support tier list. Again, please remember that these are just my opinions and very general suggestions. As always though, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Let me know what your favorite support subclass is down in the comments. Don't forget to check out the link in the description to follow me on stuff and join my Discord server, and maybe consider subscribing if you'd like to see more Destiny support content. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, make sure to stay hydrated, and I will catch y'all in the next one.